Let's run and hand it over to Greg, our producer, and do our roundtable talk. Greg's got some questions I know he wants to ask of us, and I know we've got some answers we want to share with Greg.
Yeah, I did want to. By the way, that was Daquan Jones, Jim. So,
Oh yeah, right.
so when
right.
Jones went down and Milano went down, it's exactly around the time that they've now dropped 5 straight covers. And so I got to ask you though. So shouldn't if you are losing 5 straight covers, and Vegas is putting these lines out and they're seeing that the team that they're putting this line out for each week is not covering games, shouldn't that reflect the line?
Well, you also have to put in what the public's bias is and what the sharps are like. I mean, there are teams that these
Perceptions.
the big money players like to bet, and there are teams that the public likes to bet. And you kind of have to balance that because we know that one big bettor that walks in with 200,000 is going to wipe out a lot of $5 and $10 bettors, from an influence standpoint. But when you have Josh Allen, who's supposedly one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and the Buffalo Bills was one of the favorites to make it to the Super Bowl out of the AFC, people are slow to grab onto that. The loss at quarterback, the loss at the defensive side, the conservative play calling, the injury to Allen's right shoulder, all takes away from me to want to play them, and I'm certainly not going to be laying points with them, especially after what you just said, 5 losses to the spread and all the negativity on defense and offensive production. Now, giving up almost 400 yards to Joe Burrow is no shame at all, because that guy's pretty damn good, and he is one of the best. And right now, I'd say you'd have to consider him as an MVP candidate to win that MVP of the year, at least in the AFC best player. But he's going up against another one, as far as betting with Jackson, with Baltimore. So those 2 teams are 2 of my top 4 teams in the league. So I can't take too much away there. But going against Sean Payton, Russell Wilson, and their improvement, which figures to be over the year, I'd be not betting the Bills with your money, honestly.
Well, they didn't even cover Tampa Bay a couple weeks ago. So what does that tell you? And by the way, actually, I got to ask you though. So, is there a way to find out? Is there software out there? Is there a company out there that follows that type of wagering? What I mean by that is that because, like you said, Vegas is going to maybe change, or they should change the line, just like you would see at the racetrack, if someone comes in with a heavy bet. But is there a way to find out, because obviously if they're going to change the line based on a heavy bet, well, that's only one person. So why should I be influenced by one person's, feeling on a game?
Well, the money, I mean, if I'm a bookmaker and a guy walks in with 200 grand on one side, another guy walks up with 20 on the other side, I'm going towards the 200 grand. I'm moving in that direction. And that's, today it's a different world. We have bookmakers. We've had offshore bookmakers for the last 20 years, but now we have legalized sports betting throughout the states. So, and a lot of these places, the FanDuel, DraftKings, all these, they're taking money and they're making moves. And so the bookmaking landscape has changed quite dramatically. In the old days, when I talked to the bookmakers in Vegas all the time, every day, I knew what they were thinking. It's different today because everybody's reacting to what everybody else is doing. They're not always good decisions because a lot of these bookmakers they're there to, attract customers, attract deposits. They're not too worried about losing a couple bucks here and there if they can pick up another 400, 500, 1,000 customers that week.
That's a great point that you make there, Jim. I think it's an outstanding point. And I'll say this, Greg, to your question here is you can on legal sportsbook sites, you can find out the percentage of wagers that are occurring on each team. And also, if you see an odd, inordinate amount of wagers being bet on a team, but the game is not moving, it's likely because of what Jim said. You're getting a ton of $20 bettors as opposed to the guy that's betting 100 large in the game.
Okay. I won't take too much time because I know we're really cooking with content today. So I have to ask you guys though about the San Francisco Jacksonville game. Andy?
Well, I forget what the game was where we talked about it before, but Jacksonville's won 5 in a row, and now all of a sudden their momentum is snapped because of the fact that they have to have their bye week. Came at a bad time. When you're winning, you want to keep on playing. You don't want to change your routine, and that's often reflected in the results on the field. At the same time, San Francisco's lost 3 in a row. We know the reasons. No Deebo Samuel, no Trent Williams. Purdy forced to do some things he hadn't been asked to do because of some of those injuries. No Deebo Samuels, as I mentioned. They've lost 3 in a row, scoring 17 points exactly in each of those 3 games. So the bye came at the right time for San Francisco. Jacksonville has had a fine season. They're clearly the best team, at least playing the best football. I think the best roster in the AFC South, which is still a relatively weak division. Not that the NFC West is all that much better, but I don't know that there's as big a drop-off to the bottom of the NFC West as there is in the AFC South. And I'm talking about, look, San Francisco, Seattle, those are playoff teams, and the Rams are improved. I don't know that you could say that about the teams. Well, you could say Houston's improved for a very low place to start from. I happen to like San Francisco in this game. The organization is strong. When you consider everything with full health, you can make a case that San Francisco has got the best roster and the best balance of any team in the league. They can do many things on offense with Samuel McCaffrey, George Kittle, etc., Deebo Samuel, etc., the offensive line. And defensively, they're as good as any team in the league as well. This is a game that San Francisco, well, they actually find themselves tied with Seattle. I think they're both 5-3, which is something you would not have expected. You would not have expected the 49ers to lose 3 in a row, but you understand the reason. As much as I like Jacksonville in normal situations, if the 49ers had not lost 3 in a row, if they were coming off a loss, just a single loss, I would be more inclined to play Jacksonville plus the 3. But I think that this is such a high-caliber team in San Francisco with their experience. They've been at it for several years now with the core largely intact. Before adding McCaffrey last year has made a big difference. I'm going to be on San Francisco in this game.
Victor, how do you see this game shaking out?
Well, I did mention a little bit earlier that there's a good system to go under the total when both teams are off their bye. I've got the numbers, in fact, in the database here. In the last 6 years, both teams are off their bye week, 2 overs, 13 unders. It's also a game in which the road team is favored, which have been very, very strong underplays in the last 2 seasons with the Niners laying points. It could potentially be one of the most weather-impacted games of the weekend. From what I hear, high winds down in Jacksonville on Sunday morning and potentially during the Sunday afternoon. Not to mention there is a chance of rain down here as well. So we got multiple factors, and I'm going to be on the under. Just make sure that if you do join me, both 44 and 45 are key numbers. The number is hanging right now at 45.0. So if you're going to join me on the under, grab a 45.0 or higher, just in case the number falls right on 44, which is a key number, would mean we would cash the under winner by a full point.
Well, I'm with Andy in this football game, guys. I think what this amounts to, just to keep it short, is the fact that this is a step-up game for Jacksonville. To prove that they belong to run with the big boys here right now. They haven't beat big boys in the past. They haven't beat the NFC West. They've been beat like a drum. They've lost 16 of the last 17 games against teams of the NFC West. And you've got in San Francisco a team that we alluded to earlier here a month ago was the best team in the National Football League. And now they've taken, for all intents and purposes, 3 standing 8 counts in a row. They've weathered that storm. They've had a week of rest to get ready for the football game. I'm with Andy. I'm on San Francisco in this game.
Back to that Green Bay game a second. Have you guys, I noticed, I was going over the research, that all of their lines this year have been between 3 and 3. Have you ever noticed anything like that before over the long season where one team has never been a dog of over 3 or a favorite of over 3?
I think that's a real oddity.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I'm sure we could check that out in the database, but that's a good point, Greg. I wasn't aware of it. I had no clue about that. So I'm sure we can check it out, but
Yeah.
I think it's a rarity. I really do.
Well, that's good research, and I'm wondering how much of that has to do with at the start of the season, little was known about Green Bay post Rodgers, and little is still known about Green Bay with Jordan Love. They're not a bad team, but they're not a good team either.
Yeah, they don't have an identity is what they
Yeah.
have. Don't have, right?
By the way, Matt LaFleur was the quarterback coach with Atlanta, Jim.
Okay.
That was
I do remember when he got hired as the head coach, I didn't feel like he had the qualifications for that job.
yeah, he was
Isn't Matt LaFleur part of the Mike Shanahan original coaching tree? I mean, he had that Washington at
Kyle
that time.
Shanahan, yeah. Yep.
Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah.
That at the time they were called the Redskins.
Yeah.
2010, I believe, to 2013, that Shanahan coaching tree did include guys like LaFleur, like our guy down here in Miami, McDonald. In fact, numerous coaches that are head coaches right now in the NFL. It's kind of weird that Washington team didn't do very, very well during that 4-year period, considering where some of those coaches are right now.
And Sean McVay.
And McVay too, right?
They let them all go.
Yeah, yes, they
Yeah.
did.
That's why they have a new owner. So, and then just quickly on college, I have to ask you guys, Andy, most impressed with New Mexico State or UNLV?
I'm impressed with both of them, and I think both of them have outstanding coaches that have had decent track records in the past. Jerry Kill, of course, back with Northern Illinois, I believe it was, and then Minnesota before some health issues caused him to step away. Barry Odom, coach at Missouri, an assistant at Arkansas under Sam Pittman's staff the last few years. It's hard to say I'm impressed more with one than the other because both have well exceeded expectations, and both have been making money all year.
Mark?
I echo Andy's sentiments exactly here. I have to tip my hat to UNLV on the great turnaround they've had. I've always been a big Jerry Kill fan, even from his days in the MAC, and the seizures that he had to fight through in his life, and he keeps fighting on, and he's a hero in my heart, my eyes. And I love seeing what he's doing with New Mexico State here. This football team, guys, I believe they've won 7 games. They're already well past being bowl eligible. And in our midweek alert newsletter this week, if you get a chance, you might want to download this, but it was one of the games that I wrote up in the midweek. And they bring something to the table in this game that's really unique that you just don't see anywhere. And it's the fact that they're an underdog who runs the football, rushes the ball for 6 yards a carry, and they're taking points from a favorite who allows 5 yards a carry. Usually, in that world of YPRs, 5x5 dogs are outstanding. When you get a 6x5 dog, I mean, it's almost time to pop the champagne. You don't see this very often in a game like we have with New Mexico State.
Yeah.
Yep. Based on 13 games, they had to win 7, which they just did for bowl eligibility. But now they're at Western Kentucky on Saturday. And if they beat Western Kentucky, they're going to play at Liberty for the Conference USA Championship.
Nice.
So it's not just about bowl eligibility. They're actually a win away from being in the championship game.
Exactly. They got their sights set on bigger fish to fry. Exactly.
And then they go at Auburn next week.
Nice.
Greg, last week I kind of poo-pooed UNLV a little bit, and I got taken to task by Greg, our producer on the show. And I did do some research over the weekend, Greg, and I mean, you're absolutely right. 3rd place in the Mountain West Conference, 7-2 straight up for the Rebs. Not only that, they're tied for the best ATS record in college football this season. There's only 2 teams who are 8-1 ATS: Arizona Wildcats and UNLV Rebels. So I take it back. Good year for them. The Rebels, particularly on offense. Yeah,
I think New Mexico State's on a 7-game point spread streak right now too. So they're probably in the conversation as well.
Yeah, and by the way, UNLV also in the mix for the Mountain West Conference Championship game to take on Air Force if Air Force wins out. So big game between Wyoming and UNLV tomorrow, actually. Both teams have a chance to play in the
Big
Mountain
game
West
with
Conference.
Fresno State and San Jose State
Yep.
on
Also,
Saturday night because UNLV played Fresno State and lost. So Fresno has the tiebreaker against UNLV. And of course, Air Force 5-0 in conference played their lone loss last week. That's one of the shocking results of not just the week, but the season, the way, especially since they were playing in Denver to Army. It makes it interesting because, and it will be interesting to see what the line move does in Fresno, San Jose, which will be played Saturday night, how it is affected by the result. If UNLV wins on Friday night, tomorrow night against Wyoming, it makes it very important for Fresno to win to maintain that one-game advantage. Should UNLV lose on Friday to Wyoming, well, then Fresno still needs to win to maintain an edge over some other two-loss teams. But San Jose State is also in the mix for the conference championship, although they may need some help. But if they beat Fresno, they'll be in good position. So that's going to be a very interesting and entertaining game on Saturday night. But there will be some impact in the line, I believe, based upon what what UNLV does against Wyoming tomorrow night.
Yeah, Mark and I are going to go over all this on our college football show on the RLED's channel. But when I was saying with Wyoming, why it was so big, because keep this in mind: if Wyoming wins and Fresno loses, Wyoming has the edge on Fresno because Wyoming beat Fresno.
Yep.
So now so either way, so Fresno obviously wants UNLV to win. Even though you would think the opposite, but yeah, they want UNLV to win, and then hopefully. But again, that's it's shaping up to be a really good next couple of weeks. That's what we love about this time of year in college football. Lastly, before I bring it back to you, Andy, for your pick of the week is, and I'll just ask you, Jim. I know we don't talk too much college football, but I got to ask you, when USC is a 15-point dog to Oregon. The money, initially I'm like, of course I'm all over Oregon. How can I not be? USC mentally, they got to be in the crapper. Oregon's probably going to just have no doubt that they're going to go in that game. And if they can blow out USC, I'm sure they're going to want to do that. But anytime you see USC as like what are they, a 5-1 dog or something like that on the money line, a 6-1 dog, doesn't that? How do you invest in something like that just because a team like that is so talented and they're getting such a big number on just the money line?
I wouldn't take the money line on it, but I'd take the points, but I would not take the money.
Oregon might be the best team in the Pac-12.
Yeah.
Well, the question is, Oregon and Washington are two really quality teams.
Yes.
They're fighting to get into the playoffs. Is there any chance those teams could make the playoffs?
Yes.
As one-loss teams winning the Pac-12,
Yep.
I'm sure there'd probably be a real good chance. Right?
Washington's in the better shape because they've already beaten Oregon in the regular season. That's probably going to be the matchup. I think if Oregon were to beat Washington, a lot of it would depend upon the Ohio State, Michigan, how that plays out. Do they beat each other along with Penn State, and each has one loss? What happens? Will Florida State get tested by Miami this week? Could they be upset? They're perfect. Texas still in the picture in the Big 12 with that one loss so far in the season, and the impressive win at Alabama. And then you got to consider the situation Alabama and Georgia. What comes out of the SEC championship game if Alabama? I guess they would have to be called pull an upset on Georgia. You could have multiple one-loss teams, or you could have 3 or 4 unbeaten teams, and I think that would have a lot to do with if anyone comes out of the Pac-12. I think this year, based upon the overall quality of play, I'd have to rate the winner of the Pac-12 to be better than, let's say, Florida State, assuming they win the ACC. So unless they give 2 bids to the Big Ten, which I don't think would happen, especially with the Harbaugh situation, that I would think that the Pac-12 winner most likely would get a 4th spot.
And I think it would be fitting for the Pac-12 to make the college football playoff in their final year of their conference as well.
Yeah. So if Oregon does win out, and they're 6th in the rankings right now, so if they win out, I mean, the one thing that could hurt them is if Alabama beats Georgia in the SEC championship game, because they'll put both of those teams in the playoffs. And if Florida State doesn't lose, then all of a sudden, somebody's going to get screwed if the Big Ten champion is undefeated, and that would be Oregon.
This might be a good year to have the 12 teams in the playoffs.
1 year too early.
Right.